Whack.
You're now watching the Mystical Green Beanie.
So, since Warner Brothers is probably never going to release another Superman movie in my lifetime, I wanted to talk about their last Superman film they distributed, Man of Steel, by Zack Snyder and a whole host of brilliant and talented and beautiful filmmakers who helped bring that film to life. Now, this movie gets a lot of hate, and part of me gets why. This film, for a lot of people, is what something like Spider-Man Homecoming or Iron Man 3 was for me. On paper, this film delivers on what a lot of people said they wanted. But the way it's presented is just skewed, and not how they wanted it. But that's a video topic for another day. Point is, a lot of people have problems with this movie, and I sympathize with their complaints. In fact, I share some of those complaints myself. But I think all of those hot takes where people say Zack Snyder and David Goyer hate Superman, and everyone who worked on Man of Steel is embarrassed by the character, and anyone who likes this movie doesn't like the character of Superman, they just like Zack Snyder, are factually incorrect and quite puerile, and you should probably check yourself if you're saying these things unironically. But yeah, I still remember when I first saw Man of Steel in theaters. Superman was a character I had no real strong feelings on. I mean, I liked moments that he had in Justice League Unlimited and the DC animated universe on the whole, such as the famous World Made of Cardboard scene and some of his interactions between him and Batman. And I recall seeing Superman Returns as a kid and thinking that it was fun, it was fine. Same with Superman and the Legion of Superheroes. I liked that show well enough. Same with Smallville. Actually, never mind. I didn't like Smallville as a kid. I thought it was stupid. Then I went back and watched it as an adult and was like, yeah, no, I was right. This sucks. But again, I always thought Superman was cool, but I never really got it. You know, I never really understood what the appeal was aside from him being the first modern superhero. But then I watched Man of Steel, and suddenly everything just clicked. Superman isn't the story of a benevolent alien who came to Earth and used his godlike powers to act as some holier-than-thou messiah. Contrary to popular belief, Superman is not perfect. The story of Superman is one of a lonely child who grew up in the middle of nowhere and felt like a freak of nature and was ostracized by many of his peers for the supernatural things that he could do. A child who discovered that he's not only adopted, but his parents aren't even from this planet. A kid who feels compelled to help people despite the fact that they might not like him for what nature made him. A kid who very easily could have turned his loneliness into despair and contempt, but instead chooses to see the good in the world. Superman is the story of a boy who grew into a man, who realized the full limits of his powers, and instead of lording over everyone like a god among ants, he walks among them, humbly, lending a helping hand whenever he's presented the opportunity, rising to the occasion when there's a call to action, and refusing to give up when the weight of the world is sometimes literally on his shoulders. Man of Steel showed me that Superman isn't Superman simply because he's faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, and able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. And it's not because he's better because he knows better, or has super judgment and can tell us exactly what we need to hear when we need to hear it because he has all the answers. Superman is Superman because he tries. Even when placed in impossible situations where the average man would surely be selfish and take the easy way out, Superman goes the other way. Even if the other way offers him nothing but an uphill battle. Battles he's not even sure he can win. He moves forward not allowing the odds that are stacked against him to stop him from doing the right thing, from doing the selfless thing. But now I've gotten way ahead of myself. So there's a lot in this movie to latch onto, but the major element that stood out to me, and what I wanted to talk about, was this idea of progressive idealism versus arrogance and stagnation within the context of the legacy of Krypton. So before I go on about the ideas of the film, let me give you a quick setup. So the film's conflict centers around General Zod wanting to rebuild Krypton after Krypton go boom. So he goes to Earth and meets Superman, and he's like, hey, you're Kryptonian. You should hang out with us, and we're gonna remake Krypton, but we gotta kill everything on the planet to do it. And Superman's like, I mean, I'm happy that I finally found people that I can relate to and talk about my heritage with, but I don't know, man. Genocide's just not very cash money. So then they fight, and then Superman wins because his moniker's in the title. There's this plot device in the film. Really, it's more of a MacGuffin. It's called the Codex. It's referred to as a registry of citizens. It's this thing that Krypton has built its entire civilization around because using cutting-edge Matrix, baby, technology, the Codex assigns specific traits to any and all Kryptonians who are born. And because of this, every Kryptonian is genetically programmed to be the best in their respective field, or at the very least, dogmatically believe that they're the best in their field, resulting in a society where everyone arrogantly thinks that they're the hero of the story because they somehow know better. Thus, nobody's willing to cooperate with anyone else because I'll be damned if they're going to have to listen to what someone else has to say, or compromise and work with others to find solutions to their planet's problems. Holy fuck, I really wish this movie weren't so relevant right now. Anyways, there's a scientist by the name of Russell Crowe, government name Jor-El, who not only realizes that the planet is dying, but nobody will listen to him because everyone is too set in their personal respective ideologies to find a viable solution to fix the problem. So in order to preserve the legacy of Krypton, he, alongside his wife Laura, defy Krypton's Matrix baby thing, and they decide to have a child naturally.
Suck it, John Byrne.
Kidding. I love John Byrne. He's a natural treasure. Just don't ask his opinion on Hispanic women's hair. So Jor-El steals the Codex and downloads the entire thing into his son Kal-El, gifting him options. With the Codex coursing through his body, Kal-El is given the ability to choose what he wants to do with his life, because he's now capable of doing anything and everything. His father bestows upon him the gift of free will, the will to act on his own accord or not act, and subsequently learn from his action or inaction, and truly grow as a person from those experiences. Because unlike the other Kryptonians, he's not shackled to arrogance. He's not held back in his beliefs that his way is the right way. He's given the gift of not having tunnel vision. And this is the rift between Kal-El, Clark Kent, and General Zod throughout the whole film. Because Superman is fundamentally, genetically, and ideologically counter to everything that Zod is programmed to believe in. Zod was bred to maintain the status quo of his society and its people by any means necessary. His whole plan in Man of Steel is to resurrect Krypton, a planet whose society hinged on self-destructive cultural practices. A society that stagnated culturally and technologically, which sowed the seeds for them to literally commit suicide. This is the Krypton that Drew Zod was programmed to protect and, if need be, rebuild. But there's one thing standing in his way. He needs the Codex to accomplish his mission. And the Codex is no longer a thing, but much rather a person. And that person is Superman. And I think it's really important that we see Clark Kent go through the experiences that he goes through in his flashbacks, as well as his journey to self-discovery in the film, because it makes his acceptance to the call to action all the more impactful. We see him interacting with every manner of human being, and watch as he experiences firsthand human cruelty, humanity's bloodthirsty crave for violence, and people who truly represent the worst that mankind has to offer. However, we also see him experience human kindness firsthand. We see him interacting with individuals who would rather put others above themselves, and lend a helping hand whenever they saw someone who's on the ground who's hurting. So when General Zod proposes a holocaust that would bring about the eradication of the human race, Superman stands in defiance, because despite all of the assholes he's come across in life, despite all of the bullies he's had to put up with, despite the loss he's suffered because, unfortunately, the world is the way it is, and his parents knew that, and they were afraid for their child's life, and were willing to sacrifice everything to keep him safe. Which, by the way, I know that a lot of people aren't too hot on that idea, because they feel like it turns the Kents into fear-mongering assholes. But I mean, Batman v Superman exists, and Jonathan's proven to be kinda, sorta, maybe exactly right. But again, that's a video for another day. But despite every horrible thing that's happened to Clark in his life, he never loses his faith in people, or the world around him as a whole. Because it's his belief that every person has the potential to be a force for good. And that's why Clark makes the choice to wear a skin-tight red and blue body condom and embody the idea of a brighter tomorrow. The idea that we can all come together one day and simply be the best we can be individually and collectively. A childish dream that started with a little boy who aspired to be a symbol of hope and fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, so that hopefully that kindness could be paid forward around the world. Hey, hi, yeah, quick little side note, I forgot to say this when recording, so I'll just awkwardly inject this little tidbit here after the fact. In the movie, Superman is Jor-El and Laura's son, obviously. But more importantly, he's their message in a bottle to Earth, a civilization that's far younger than Krypton, but still developing. Kal-El is a message of guidance, so that Earth would not fall victim to the same failings Krypton did. It's like Jor-El is aiming to live vicariously through his son, Kal-El Clark Kent, in Superman. And he's telling Earth that Krypton had its chance, and they blew it. And now it's Earth's time to shine. And hopefully they'll succeed where Krypton failed. All they have to do is not succumb to the practice of tearing others down to build yourself up. Don't succumb to cruelty born from some sense of arrogant dogmatism. And don't fall victim to apathy in the face of perceived failure. And if we listen to one another and work together, we can accomplish wonders. And this is why I love this movie so much. It's distinctly a Superman story, but it's not a superhero movie. It's Superman reimagined as a first contact pulp science fiction hero. This is a very dry, mythic science fiction movie with Superman in it. And honestly, I think that's what threw a lot of people off when watching it. Because I think it's a wonderful, hopeful, optimistic film when you get to the heart of it. But on the surface, it's very, well, it's not what a lot of people were looking for in their big summer blockbuster superhero movie. Especially the year after The Avengers came out. Plus, there are just certain things done in this movie that a lot of Superman fans are just not traditionally accustomed to. Like Superman killing General Zod, even though that's how Superman 2 resolves its conflict. And how John Byrne concludes his run of the Man of Steel comic series with the Supergirl saga. And how the reign of the Superman wraps up when Superman kills Hank Henshaw. And how Final Crisis ends when Superman kills Darkseid. And Mandrak. And Brainiac at the beginning of the New 52. But traditionally, Superman doesn't kill. Even though I didn't really have a problem with it within the context of this film, because, and this is just my preferred take on the character, Superman is a hero who saves people, even sometimes from themselves. Because it's his belief that deep down, everyone has a little something in them that makes them redeemable. Something that makes them human. But then there are monsters, right? Who, unlike the run-of-the-mill supervillain, aren't acting out of a petty sense of jealousy or spite, or feel like their actions are justified because they're legitimately mentally ill and need help. Monsters are a different breed of supervillain. They're driven by death, and have the ability to kill hundreds upon thousands of people, and will enjoy it, because they have abandoned their humanity in their pursuits to become a force for evil. And I don't know, I think it's okay for Superman to cross that line in his crusade to protect the innocent when it comes to those types of existential threats. And I still think the film justifies Superman's actions by showing the audience that General Zod is a monster. Besides, I kind of like that Zod dies at Superman's hand. Again, within the context of the film, because this whole movie is about the legacy of Krypton, and Jor-El wanted his son to embody what Krypton was in its golden age. Vibrant, glorious, regal. Meanwhile, General Zod and his militia are foils for Jor-El's vision, because they're the product of Krypton's failings. Dark, cruel, and morally inept. So when Superman kills General Zod, he's not just vanquishing evil. He's laying to rest the legacy of what Krypton devolved into, so that he can move forward as the memorial for what Jor-El wants Krypton to be remembered for. And I will say, that's my one major gripe with this movie. I think it's titled wrong. For a movie that's all about Krypton's legacy, I think a better title for this film would have been Last Son of Krypton. Either that or Man of Tomorrow. Superman Birthright's also a title that works pretty well too. In fact, I think Birthright's a great title for this movie. I mean, at the very least, it's more fitting here than it is for the actual comic Superman Birthright. Like, seriously, what is Clark inheriting in that story? I don't get it. I don't get it. That book should have been titled Man of Tomorrow, because that's what the story's about. But now I'm talking about titles and comics and... Okay, I'm seriously getting sidetracked. Moving on, one complaint that I will bend the knee on is the collateral damage. And it's weird because when you read Superman comics, Superman engaging in these massive battles in the streets of Metropolis and throwing bad guys through buildings and getting thrown through buildings himself is not a big deal. Hell, not just in Superman comics, but in superhero comics in general. And it's something that's only really been addressed in more recent comics within the last 20 or so years in the pages of books like Invincible and The Ultimates. So, for me, while it did feel like an itch being scratched, finally seeing Superman take on an alien armada and go toe-to-toe with bad guys who are on his level, I also understand that what works on the comic page doesn't always translate to screen. Because when you're reading a comic book, Collateral Damage is dynamic, and it's fun to look at because comics are a visual medium and it looks cool. But on film, when you're seeing buildings collapsing and people running in the streets panicking, look, if you felt like it was a bit much, I totally feel where you're coming from. I got you. You're good. That said, I will never understand when people claim that this movie is joyless or has no heart. It does have heart. It's in Clark Kent's relationship with his father. Both of them. It's in Superman's conversations with Lois Lane about who he is and why he chooses to do what he does. It's in Superman's interactions with a hostile US military whose trust he ultimately gains after doing everything in his power to prove that he's not their enemy. But most importantly, this film's heart lies in the bond that Clark shares with his mother. Hear me out. Throughout the movie, Superman is portrayed as this ultimate badass who can shoot lasers out of his face and fly at the speed of sound and punch bad guys through buildings. But at the end of the day, he'll always go back to his childhood home because he loves his mother. Guys, Earth's stalwart hero, the galaxy's ultimate badass, is a mama's boy. Now, there's something really pure and wholesome about that, right? Now, there's something really touching in hearing Martha Kent's words of comfort in Clark's darkest childhood moments. There's something beautiful in those scenes where we see Martha and her husband watch as this child from the stars, who they loved and raised as their own, grow into the man that they knew he could be. So yeah, this movie has heart, and I'm sorry that you missed it. All in all, I adore this movie. It's still, to this day, one of my favorite comic book adaptations of superhero comics. Comic book adaptations of super... Wow, okay, words. But again, if this doesn't match your sensibilities, that's fine. And I get where a lot of complaints are coming from, but for me, this was something special. And I'm not sure if I was just the right age when this came out, or if it was the style in which the stories and the characters was presented or whatever. But the things that this movie was saying with Superman, just... it hit different. And I got it in a way that I didn't when watching the animated movies and the shows, or reading the comics up until that point. This movie made a character who, growing up, I was always indifferent towards, one of my favorite characters in fiction. And for that, it'll always have a very special place in my heart. Anyways, what about you guys? What are your thoughts regarding Man of Steel all these years later? What are your thoughts regarding my thoughts? What's your favorite Superman movie? What's your favorite Superman comic? Excluding All-Star Superman, because that is everyone's go-to answer. Come on, let's make this a little harder for you guys. But yeah, let me know down below in the comments section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share, support the channel, and if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.